Welcome to the Preserve Your Past podcast, where we'll explore all things related to the creative process of writing your stories for future generations. I'm your host, Melissa Ann Kitchen. Author, teacher, speaker, and coach, I believe that your personal history is a priceless gift for family, friends, and generations to come. Whether you consider yourself a writer or not, we are discussing the topics that help with every step of the process, like how to mine for the juiciest story ideas or how to refine them into polished final drafts you'll be proud to share. Let's face it, sharing your stories can be overwhelming, but I've got you covered. We all have a lifetime of memories to share, so why not save yours to pass along? Let me help you leave your lasting legacy. Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the Preserve Your Past podcast. I have with me today another guest that I am so excited to share with you. It's a friend I have had who actually has played an integral part of my transition of telling my story and being more fearless, being myself and showing up as myself. And I'm so excited to share you with her. Welcome, Lauren, to the podcast. This is Lauren Bodwell.
Hi.
And thank you for joining.
Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. Lauren Bodwell is a wife and mom of two girls, which has helped her to pursue her love of photography as a career. With 10 years of professional photography experience, she has honed her skills as a portrait photographer, specializing in capturing special moments through the art of storytelling, which is why she's here with us. Her deep affinity for light and its power to illuminate the world is a guiding force behind her work. Through her lens, the world's captivating stories come to life. Lauren's mission is to convey narratives that inspire and empower individuals to embrace their authentic selves and appreciate the beauty inherent in everyday life. So I think after listening to that biography, everyone can understand how we see the connection of why you are here today. So thank you so much, Lauren. Just to give some history to people too, Lauren and I met through a training program and did a couple of live workshops together as participants. And Lauren is such an amazing photographer that when I had first begun my first coaching practice and was really ready to be visible and show myself, she's the person I trusted with my taking my pictures, which I do not feel like I'm that's not a comfort zone for me. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. But anyone who wants to see some of Lauren's beautiful work can look at my website, melissaannkitchen.com. I'm going to have her give some info at the end. But I want to say thank you so much, Lauren. You're everything about the way you come to photography is just so nurturing for everyone who gets to participate with you. So thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. And your podcast picture is one of the ones I took too.
Yes. I pretty much, those are the ones I use.
Yeah. No, I love that shoot. I remember it being very windy.
It was very, very windy. So the interesting part too is, and to tie it back in, is that Lauren and I met up. There's so many things I could talk about, but if we transition into that piece, first of all, I was, again, not comfortable having pictures, knew I wanted to have them. We had such a blast. It turned into friends like family. I brought my sister. I brought a friend that I had worked with who is also a makeup artist, and we froze our butts in the fall. It was October. It's going to be the anniversary of like when we did the pictures soon. And it was one of the things you did really well was like the intake of knowing who I was and being able to tell my story. So that's, again, where you even mention in your bio that this is one of your superpowers. It's one of the things you love. Anyone who looks at those pictures knows now I can see, like, I love old buildings. I love history. I love the ocean. So a lot of what we took that was for a different business model, totally told enough of my authentic story that I was able to still use them. So
yeah, I think to nobody likes their photos taken. That seems to be an overall theme that I see, like especially in women, like over and over and over again. But I think people think it's scarier than it really is. So, and one way of telling your story is through visual art,
Yes.
especially now with social media and websites and people owning their own businesses. It's
Mhm.
like it's very very important because people need to see who they're working with, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So taking that to the next piece of like not just business owners and that piece of being uncomfortable, I
Mhm.
think I see the same thing in storytelling. So my story, my encouragement for my listeners and my readers is that they begin documenting their stories, whether it's creating the stories around their ancestors and data,
Mhm.
or whether it's starting with themselves, because that's kind of my mantra is let's start with ourselves.
Mhm.
But it is sometimes very hard to tell those authentic, real stories in the same way it's challenging to be in the photos with
Yeah.
everyone else.
Yeah.
What are
Um, Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, what do you, tell me a bit, because I know we've talked about this a little bit, and I know
Yeah.
that you are also putting, as the photographer, that's even more of a challenge for you to put yourself in the photos for your girls.
Mhm.
But are there some things that you do to kind of assist people, or that have been a mindset shift for you in just that challenge of being part of your own pictures and your own story?
Part of your, yeah. I think when I first started, photography has always been a part of my life growing up. Um, and then once I had my oldest daughter, I knew that it was important to either capture her growing up, and because I was part of a forum of moms, and so all the moms were like, "Be in the photo. You need to be in the photo." And that was, I think, the biggest thing for me is like how to incorporate myself, but I just want to take the photos. And so, yeah, it's trying to balance, what am I trying to say? Trying to balance like you capturing and documenting your story, but also being included in that story.
Yes.
I think too, as a new mom, and I see this a lot with like maternity shoots, like documenting the belly and the baby. Moms don't want to be in the photo because either it's they don't look good, they don't feel good, it's a body image thing. It's no, no, it's not about me, it's about them. I hear that one a lot. It's about my kids, it's about my kids. I'm like, no, no. Because when your kids get older and you're not in the photo, they'd be like, where's mom?
Yeah.
Like they just want photos of mom.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's interesting because we talk about that a lot, about how even sometimes with our stories, our kids are not interested in those at a certain age. And then all
Mhm.
of a sudden we realize we are. So one of my really good friends and
Mhm.
I, when I was starting to do this work, was talking about how she didn't know anything about her mom before she was a mom. And
Mhm.
then as she got older, started learning more about her and
Mhm.
was like, oh my gosh. So now she could see like my boys aren't thinking about who I was before I was a mom, but I'm going to make sure I get that down. And it's kind of that same thing of like, we have those pictures. Also, from what I'm hearing too, it's like we do that for the big events.
Mhm.
We do it for the big events. They're about other people. But even in my story workshops, it's a like one of the chapters of my book is actually like include the little things. Like we need
Yeah.
those little stories. I talk about a story with my mom that was like this one day that happened that was hysterical, and it wasn't like her being like anything. It turned out to be something about her character came out in the story when I told it, but it was just one day, average day. And then adding, when we talk about ourselves, the little things about ourselves that show we're real, like our language to be the language we would use. So if someone was going to read that, they could see us in the story and
Yeah.
hear us.
I think looking back, like when, film was huge and like very limited and a lot of people didn't have cameras. So like those portraits of like a grandmother or family portraits were so valuable because that's the only maybe still portrait you have. Like I have my grandmother's portrait on the wall. I never got to meet her, but I have her portrait on the wall, and that is so important because there's probably maybe less than a dozen photos of her. Um, but like some of my favorite pictures, when I scroll back on my phone, especially like one of my favorite activities to do is just to look back, is those like silly, non-important moments like eating ice cream or even just like special places like going up to camp. Or we actually just had family camping this weekend. We had like there was 32 of us. It was cousins, aunt and uncles, grandparents, like sister, like brothers, like everyone. And so we do a group photo, and that's great. But then you have photos of like the campfire and roasting marshmallows and the little
Hmm.
cousins on their bikes. And
Hmm.
so I think it's really good because snapping photos along the way helps to create those stories and
Hmm.
help with the visuals. And I think that's the part of the storytelling that I like because I don't know, you just capture like these moments that are for my kids are core memories. For me, it
Hmm.
might not necessarily be like this huge thing, but they're like, there was 10 cousins or something playing
Yeah.
together, and it was
Yeah.
like it's very much a core memory. So when they look back on that, they're like, oh, I have a picture of this. And
Yeah.
so
Yeah. Then it reaches back to bring them back to that time
yeah.
too.
Hmm.
Yeah. It's neat too because um, thinking about the even how we can use our photos to remind us of those feelings when we're telling the story. So
Hmm.
often one of the prompts I'll have people use to a simple way to start, which it seems so obvious, but it's not just so that you have like, here's the prop and we're going to describe what's in the picture because we can see what's in the picture with our eyes. But it's
Hmm.
fun to look at the picture and remember and tell about all the other things that were kind of happening
Hmm.
around it or how you felt during it. Like you were talking
Hmm.
about like them looking back and remembering, what they were feeling when they were playing with all their cousins, or then
Hmm.
they might remember some particular thing. It's so funny. I have pictures of my first birthday that I have
Hmm.
in one of the binders, photo albums that I
Hmm.
have from growing up. And one of the stories when I used to go through it, I used to go through it since I was little, then you go
Hmm.
through, you look, you're telling yourself your memories that you remember of that, if you really remember it.
Yeah.
In my mind, my dad and I were home having a first birthday party for me
Hmm.
because my mother was not in this picture.
Yeah.
I literally, when I was little, looking through those, thought, "Oh, Dad and I had a night. I wonder where
Yep.
Mom."
Yep.
So
No,
that
I was,
also goes to that, like being in the pictures, but it's
yeah.
also funny how we use those as throughout childhood and adulthood to like anchor in a remembering.
I always say that my husband has really, really nice photos of him and the kids. Like there are hundreds of photos of just him and the girls, and they're beautiful.
Yeah,
And then it's like, not that I mean, he takes really nice photos and he makes sure that I'm in the photos and he'll take the camera away from me, but like it's different. It's
yeah,
different when it's
yeah,
someone else. I don't know. It's
yeah,
so, yeah.
yeah. So we've talked about this a lot. So we've talked about both of us starting our businesses with the idea that we had to be a certain way to be
Hmm.
in front of people,
Yes.
that marketing was done a certain way. And I think while we both love talking to people, it never, for me anyways, I won't speak for you, but I know I've watched your journey on social media, which has turned out to be fabulous because I think you have, and I'm sure it's not easy still, but I feel like you're very authentic and you share your thoughts and the little thoughts, right? About like,
Yes. Little thought bubbles.
why is this? And I love it. And I really want to get more into like putting in my thoughts into that the same way I'm doing in my writing, but putting
Hmm.
it more out onto social media. But how and we've talked about that idea of what feels right to us for vulnerability. How did
Hmm.
you get from that? How did that journey look like from the beginning of when you were really amping up your photography and felt like you knew you needed to be more visible, but then and it was kind of happening. I mean, we've known each other for a few years now as social media was kind of shifting because I feel
Yeah.
like even Instagram was just beginning to like take off. And so we were trying to think about what does that mean for being a visual storyteller, right?
Hmm.
How did that journey of the shoulds to the what you share, like how you show up now. Because I feel like we do that with, and for everyone here, it's not that I'm expecting we're talking about social media, but in our
Yeah.
stories, there's the shoulds of our stories and how we write them. And then it's how do we find our voice? And I think Lauren really did a great job at finding her authentic voice and not feeling like you had to write it or speak it as if what you thought everyone wanted to hear.
Yeah. Well, thanks. Sometimes I still feel like I haven't found my true voice in the sense that I think there's still doubt with like what I want to say. And, when you start to put yourself out there, especially like I think social media should play a big role in storytelling in our photos because now everyone is a photographer. And I'm not saying that as a negative thing, I'm saying that it's a very positive thing. Um, but in the beginning, I saw myself as just documenting my family, and I thought that I wanted to do that for other people and tell stories and loved. I was on Instagram like I don't know a month after they started it, and I was like, this is amazing. I get to like take pictures of whatever I want and show people my perspective and like tell people what I'm looking at. And then it kind of shifted into like, oh, what do people really want to see? Is it supposed to be curated? It's supposed to be
Mm-hmm.
perfect. And so that was a little different. And then being like, this doesn't feel good. Like
Mm-hmm.
I love light. Light is what helps tell a story for me. It's like a character in like your story.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how I feel when I take pictures, but also it's about the moment. Like I one of my mentors throughout the years, she's like, what makes a really good photograph is like the moment. Like, obviously, composition plays a role, obviously, light plays a role, but like, if there's no moment in the photo, then it's just kind of a picture.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not a photo. Um, so there has to be something happening.
Mm-hmm.
And then because of that, I feel like as a photographer, I put a lot of pressure on myself to take like this amazing moment photo.
Moment. Yeah.
Yeah. But
The
it,
moments are happening anyways.
Exactly. But also I have to remember that like when I'm taking pictures for other people, it's their moment, it's not my moment.
Mm-hmm.
So
Oh
it doesn't
yeah.
matter. Yeah, it doesn't
Yeah.
matter necessarily what's happening. If I think it's like nothing's happening, I'm like, well, that's a bad photo. No one knows what's happening, but it's their family, it's their photo, it's their memories. They don't really care as
Mm-hmm.
much. Um, and then like moving forward, like everything, like everyone's documenting everything.
Mm-hmm.
And so then it's like
We're
content, you need,
less curated. Now we're
yeah,
we're away from the curation. Yeah, for
yeah.
sure.
I think people are wanting more authenticity. And so people are trying to figure out like what's the line.
Mm-hmm.
So I think motherhood has helped me like kind of break down my barriers and be more vulnerable. Like I documented a lot of like my postpartum struggles, like my body changing, like my girls, like obviously growing up, like when they were little, it was easy to take photos of them because life was very slow. Like you were just like eat, change,
Yeah.
like play, sleep. Like it was just very slow. So it's like I think I just needed those little small moments to document. Like I have probably thousands and thousands of photographs on my phone that I haven't edited, that hasn't gone anywhere. I
Mm-hmm.
haven't printed. Like I kind of feel bad. But I don't know, it's I guess as a photographer, it's finding out what's most important to you and what you like, what moments you want to tell. And
Mm-hmm.
I guess I don't know. I don't know if
Yeah.
I answered
So
all of your
I'm going to
question.
transition from that. And
Uh-huh.
I didn't even prepare you that I would talk about this, but you said, what's important to you? And I know
Yes.
you like jam.
Oh my God. I have my box of
So,
jam in my closet.
so for everyone joining us, when we're done with this and when you look up Lauren and you can follow her, but talking about this even from storytelling, like sharing something that doesn't seem to be a big deal. It's a little thing and it's a silly thing, but it's a you thing, right? And
Yeah.
it's actually a thing that people love joining. It's joyful. It's not political. It's not like this big thing, but it's so much fun. I love joining you in it. And it's another connection thing.
Yeah.
But Lauren has joined well, I don't even, you can tell us how it started, but she does some Instagram reels and it started like I'll let you talk, but regarding jam.
Jam time.
Jam.
So I think it started over a year ago. You guys didn't even realize. So I watched a TikTok, I think in 2021, of this creator that had gotten this advent calendar from Bon Maman like jam. And I was like, what is this? Like, you know how opening up advent calendars as a
I love
kid,
it.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
every day you're like, ooh,
Mm-hmm.
and then you eat this like really crappy chocolate. But but then she had been doing this, and I was like, I want that. And so last year I ordered it. I ordered this 25-day jam calendar. And then I was just like, I'm gonna show up on Instagram and eat jam in front of people. And it turned out to be this huge thing. Like people are like, what's today's jam? And
Yeah.
I called it jam time. And I don't know, I was just me. Like
Yeah.
I told it how it was.
Yeah. That's
Yeah,
what I loved.
there was
And I think
no
that gave
filter.
you the practice to be you because it
Yeah.
gave you something to distract you from not being you. I think,
Yeah.
especially as you went through, and it was about the jam. So you're like, nope, don't like that one. Like even your
Yeah.
facial
You
expression,
can't
everything
hide
about
it.
you came out more real, which I
Yeah.
think even writing, we could think about like, if there's something like that I think the habit of doing it over and over, right? And then
Mm-hmm.
having that thing that takes away our self-consciousness about it's about us,
Mm-hmm.
because it's not about us, and then a connecting thing. And
Yeah.
plus the playfulness.
I think I grew up to being very aware of how I was like, so I grew up with like learning disability, like, I had a hard time reading and writing, and everything was very difficult and slow for me for a really long time. And then as an adult, I kind of looked around and was like, oh, no one knows what they're doing. Everyone has their struggles. And you kind of like fit in with everybody else. So as a
Mhm.
kid growing up in school, you feel very like either you're in or you're out. And I was a student, like I was an athlete, so I fit in here, but I didn't fit in over here. And so I would tell myself I'm not a good writer. I'm
Mhm.
not a good reader. Like
Mhm.
I take photos, they're really pretty, but like I can't do this, I can't do that. And then like you grow up, and I'm almost 40, and then you have fewer fucks to give, I think. And so I think over the last year or so too, I've kind of been like, clicking, like switching the filter off. Like, how do I feel about this? How do I want to show up? And even
Mhm.
over the summer, I went through a little transition about not wanting to show up because I didn't want to show up like and fake it. I didn't
Yeah.
want to feel like I had to show up, or
Yeah. I
I
love
didn't
that
have,
too.
yeah, I didn't feel like I didn't have anything to say. Nothing was very inspiring, but then I
Yeah.
realized that that's okay too. Like
Yeah.
you can hide away, or you can just like slow down. And
Mhm.
I think I was missing being present with like my kids, especially. I wasn't taking photos for myself. I was taking a lot of photos for other people, which was great, but it didn't feel authentic showing
Mhm.
up and taking pictures for people who wanted to take, to have that like branding and portraiture. It just became like kind of work,
Mhm.
like work.
Mhm.
So I was trying to see where I fit in. I think because I follow lots and lots of different photographers in different spaces, taking pictures of different things. And I think for me at the time, I was taking pictures of other people for them, and my voice and my perspective had to like not be included because it was for them. It
Mhm.
wasn't for me, which was
Mhm.
fine. But I think as a photographer, as an artist, you want your voice or perspective in there just a little bit. And
Mhm.
I was being hidden, I think, a
Mhm.
little bit. So I had to take a
Mhm.
step back and I didn't do anything over the
Mhm.
summer. So,
I think
um,
that's ebb and flow when you're a creative,
yeah,
anyways, is we do
yes.
need to make sure that we have that open time to know ourselves or to even just let it flow. I notice I kind of cycle through with even my writing, and that
Mhm,
there's times when, yeah, it's part of it is it's not fun. It's turned into
mhm,
work. Part of it is I don't have something to say, so why should I be saying it? Or I
mhm,
don't even know where to start. I have all this, but it's bouncing
mhm.
around in my head. That happens to me a lot, where when
Yes.
I give that space and just say, I'm taking a break. I had to do the same thing this summer. We had some big family transitions with my son moving overseas. And also we had a couple of house issues with like construction and things that just felt overwhelming. Some of it was really good stuff. Some of it was just busy stuff, but I felt guilty that I wasn't putting as much into my content or my own story documenting, and then realized that it was feeling like I can't just sit down and say something if I don't have what it is to say, you know? And I think that's normal. I started realizing it's seasonal for me too. Which I know you've talked a lot about, like cycle of nature and of honoring our cycle as women too, in within the month, but also I think that seasonal, you even talked about like the slow time of life with your girls when things felt slow, but then how it feels bigger or faster. And I've met your girls and I can't even imagine how fast it is now, because they were
they were
little
babies
then. One was still the wild, like she had already found her wings and was flying around, but the other, your second, was a very baby, but I think that that's something else that we like anyone who's being creative with putting their stories down honors that cycle instead of the fearing of the pause. But also remembering not to like dwell on the pause, and that you're like, it's not fearing that you're doing it. So in the action of like taking the pause, not feeling guilty, but also not thinking that just because you're in that pause, that's how it's meant to be. And you lost your glow for the goal.
I think that can tie really well into, I wrote something down this morning about how people feel a lot of pressure now to take photos, especially like creators. I have a cat that's joining me.
Yeah, I have the dog.
Yeah. Like, because I see just like tons and tons of photos every day from Instagram, TikTok, like it's like at you all the time. So I feel like a lot of moms, especially, I'm just because women are like the gatekeepers, I think, of their stories, of photos, of handing down stuff like recipes, like heirlooms, whatever it is. I think it's the women that like put this all together, just saying. So moms especially feel the pressure of getting like family photos taken every year, Christmas cards, like are the prints in an album and not a shoebox, like what are the pictures doing on the computer? Are they coming off the computer? Like I have like 25,000 photos on my camera. Like people think that's insane, but like I think too, like you don't have to get dressed up and go into a field and get family photos taken if that's not you. I think that sounds nice. I think it's pretty. Like I look at fields and I'm like, that would be so pretty, like at sunset. But like realistically, you can just take a photo of your kid coloring at the kitchen table, or I don't know, at the school bus, waiting for the school bus. I don't know. Like I think it's nice to document those times, like school pictures and like the first day of school and graduation and like all that stuff. But I also think like drinking milk at the table. Like my kids got bubbles for Easter one year, and so we were like, let's take pictures of the bubbles. I don't know. It's I think when my kids are really little, I used to take pictures of them sleeping.
Yeah.
And I love looking at the photos when they're sleeping. Like even now when I walk into my 10-year-old's room and she's asleep, she looks like she's 2 years old. And that brings back memories. So I don't know. That's my favorite thing to do. Like at night, just scroll through and you're like, look how pretty they were, like so little. And
so that goes along too with like the stories being able to be written even from that like almost journal aspect of like documenting over time, that you're, even for me, I bring people back to, so my aunt had just found they were called line a day journals. Similar to how like when I was growing up, you got your diary and it had like, you just had so much space, you had to write it. And a lot of times in the 1930s and 40s, when they had started really being popular, it was like, here's the weather, here's the temperature. I think especially in New England.
It's changed.
It's Saturday. Yes, it's snowing and 32 degrees and so is coming over for this or that. But to see her feelings through those years, I think she was like 20 and she was going through an illness. She was obviously in these we were, and it's, I talked about this in one of the podcasts, you can see her relationship with my grandfather shifting because they had known each other all that time, but it was those little dips into her real life to me that were the treasures, like the kids drinking their milk or sleeping and those little baby faces, to be able to go back and look at those like little bits of
hmm I
every
think
day.
that's kind of what social media has started for, especially even the younger generations. They're using it as an everyday diary, the vlogs, the documenting like a morning, I think that's become like our little journals that they used to keep. And I think that's a great thing. I think people, if you do not like look back on your past, then what's it for? Like, why are we taking the photos? Why are we writing
Yeah.
stuff down and
Yeah.
whatnot? I actually got my in-laws, it's called Storyworth for
Mm-hmm.
Christmas. So
Mm-hmm.
like every week they get a prompt and
Mm-hmm.
um personally I wish she had put more photos in the book, but I love that I have those stories to tell my kids.
Mm-hmm.
But like how like we used to write like because I write the date and the
Yeah.
school year that my kids' school pictures. Like I get my kids' school pictures printed because I think it's adorable.
Oh
I don't
yeah.
care what they wear. I don't care what their
Yeah.
hair is
Yeah.
like. But I'm like, 2000, whatever, and like first grade, second grade, and so they can see that progression. Um, but like I'm a twin, and so we have photos of my sister and I next to each other. But like there after a while, my mom forgot to write who's
Who is
who.
who?
So like, how do you know? But like I enjoy like flipping through photos and like looking on the back and seeing like Aunt Sue, like
Yeah.
whatever. Like
Yeah.
so I think we don't we don't have like a lot of people aren't printing photos anymore, which is a
Mm-hmm.
shame. But like I think if you go to someone's Instagram page or blog or
Mm-hmm.
whatever, you kind of see though what's happening in their
Yeah.
everyday and they have a little caption and that you have
Yeah.
the date. And so
So that's one of the projects I want to actually do as a workshop, but it is one of the like easy starter places that I coach people to get started, is like we talked about, the picture can tell you so much, but then you can
mhm,
also give so much around that story.
mhm,
But you brought up a really good point also about the printing and keeping it on social media. And for me, we had a really interesting talk on a training I just did the weekend before last with some genealogists who are
mhm,
documenting and gathering, and had talked about, is there a way that that I advise for families to come together and have one spot to be able to add photos or add stories. And they had talked about using Facebook for this. And one
mhm,
of the things
mhm,
I cautioned people
mhm.
with is only having all of their story on social media and reminding
Yeah.
people. Now, from a business perspective, we talk about that all the time. Like, you don't own
Mhm.
your followers, they're just there. It's a great way to connect, it's a great way to show, but it's not your platform. And same
Yeah.
thing with your pictures, with your story. It's wonderful we can do that, but we really don't know how long it will be there or what could happen that would take it down. And so I'm always thoughtful of, is there somewhere else that we can store this? Now, in this cloud type of environment, it's very hard for me to even know what that looks like, right? But we were
Yeah.
talking about being thoughtful of that, because one of the women had actually shared how, and I don't know if it was her husband who passed or if it
Mhm.
was one of her friends' husband had passed, and somehow the account got locked immediately. And so
Mhm.
all before the family could go in and take any kind of photos and memories, it was gone.
Yeah.
And so you
That's scary.
talking about that, I think it would be amazing, even for simply starting, to go back to that kind of the way the scrapbook used to be, but not
Yeah.
so like, I mean, people that want to
So
do it and do all the doodads and everything.
yeah. So
Awesome.
I feel like there are so many different ways to like get your photos off your phone, off your computer. Um, Social media is a great way to show
Hmm.
others. Like it's become like email of some sort. Like everyone
Hmm.
gets to see it. But yeah, Facebook could just shut off any minute now. And
Hmm.
like we don't own Facebook. I don't own Instagram.
Hmm.
Um, so like yeah, my your account could be shut down any minute. So I love external hard drives. I think everyone needs an external hard drive, either for like sensitive documents,
Hmm.
but all of my photos go on an external hard drive, and then I have a backup hard drive.
Yeah.
Well, and I'm in the business of like it's my business, so I need to be prepared. Um, I think a lot of people don't realize that external hard drives fail over time, so you have to
I
continue to update.
just
Yeah,
heard from someone who that happened to. A whole
yeah,
trip from Italy is gone because their external hard drive was corrupt. So I think having the two is
yeah.
like,
We can also, I love a lot of printing 4x6s and putting them in an album is a lot of work. I have a few different type of storages that I use. So I use like a plastic bin, and you know, I categorize stories or
mhm,
whatever. And I have all my husband's pictures too. So I have to like make sure that, they're all in the same place. I have albums that I put stuff in, and then I have books. So I have photo books, photo albums that like you can, digitally put together, which is great. Like I just did one for my mom and dad from our trip to Disney. Like I took everybody's photos, put them in an album, and then like put them in a digital album.
yeah.
And like she'll always have that book. I mean, like obviously it can happen, but like if you have a digital like external hard drive and printed copies, like you'll
Yeah,
have both.
you
So
have both. And yes, anything could happen at any time. But yeah, I
yeah.
do love those photo books. My friend did that for me for my 50th birthday too, with all the things that she
Mhm.
had taken throughout that time and then other pictures of things and shared that as a gift. And I
Mhm.
think and they're so affordable now. I have
Mhm.
to look into too how much text you can add with the pictures,
Mhm.
because Storyworth and those kinds of software things are good, but they are, cost prohibitive for some people, or a lot of work for some
Mhm.
people. They don't want the prompt. Like some people want to do it on their own time or their own prompts or whatnot. But
Mhm.
there are ways that we can publish, whether it's our photos or our stories, that can be something like that, that is
Mhm.
so much
Yeah.
cheaper than it ever used to be.
I actually was writing down how to preserve stories because I have a fellow photographer friend. She started incorporating audio in her photo
Mm-hmm.
stories, and I love that idea. And like
Mm-hmm.
video has taken off so much that
Mm-hmm.
like how do you like it's like a holistic
Yeah.
memory like thing.
Yeah.
Like so yeah, I don't know, I love that the whole fact of like taking photos or taking video or whatever type of medium to incorporate along with like written stories. I think
Mm-hmm.
it makes it more powerful.
Yeah. I
Like
love
it's I
that.
don't know. Yeah.
Yeah, we'll
So
have to talk because I can
yeah.
see something
Yeah.
big coming.
The
That would be fun
things
to
are
do,
moving.
integrate. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because I think people love having the community to do it in too. Like I think similar to like how the scrapbooking was a big deal to be able to go with your lady friends.
Hmm.
For my time when my kids were little, that was very popular. Part of it was community of
Hmm.
moms,
Yeah.
especially when your kids are little and you're like, I need community and I need it has to be like you felt like it had to be, for me anyways, a valid purpose,
Yes.
which is stupid because when you need time to get out, you need time
Yeah.
to get out. The purpose is so you don't kill
Yeah.
someone.
Okay. Exactly. You don't go crazy.
um, but thinking about that now, even with, I know that part of my mission is to kind of create not just virtual, but it could be virtual, but also that workshop. Writing in a workshop format is how a lot of writers write, right? When we learn to
Hmm.
write and we go through school as writers, there's always a workshop component where you can have the time, or even, during writing, when you go away and you have the quietness to be able to do a retreat on writing, there's always a component where you can like bounce off people's ideas or sit beside, even if you're never talking about what you're writing. So I could totally see
I think that's
collaborating at some point to
yeah.
do both.
I think you nailed it on the head. It's that time component that defers people from doing either putting photos in an album or writing
Mm-hmm.
down the stories. I think it's the time piece. Like, my mom actually is really into her genealogy, so she's been studying and like getting pictures and names from like from we're from northern Sicily. So like learning about my family stories and then coming over to the US, and it's
Mm-hmm.
very fascinating. Um, but like, is she gonna write those stories down? Is there a place to write those stories down?
Mm-hmm.
Um, she's starting to incorporate pictures of these people, and like we just realized that my we've been celebrating my great grandmother's birthday all wrong, like a month early.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So it's like, but like getting to see like these old pictures, it's really cool. Like my oldest, they were learning about immigration last year, and so they had to dress up like, they were from a different country and coming over, and they were like, you have to bring things in your bag, and one of them was a family portrait, and so they all had to print out family portraits of their families, and so like it was even important back then, like
Hmm.
I was just thinking about like the history of photography. It's like, why do we take photos of people before they go off to war?
Hmm.
They're gonna die.
Yeah,
We're never
yeah.
gonna see them again. Like,
That's true. The photos of like,
yeah,
I didn't even, oh my gosh, I didn't even think about how big. So my youngest is in the Air Force, and for sure, it's built into each piece of their
yeah,
training is like, you finish this, you get a photo. Yeah, they graduated basic training, they're taking a photo, but now they're doing it as a document of
yeah,
who they are in case. Oh, that's
yeah,
so weird.
yeah. So it's well, and then think about it. Like, when do you need photographs? Weddings,
Hmm.
funerals. Usually some big celebration, like probably like senior, graduation. You want to.
Graduations,
That's
yeah.
how we. I feel like that's how we honor our family. You
Hmm.
you post photos. There's
Hmm.
photos everywhere, and
Hmm.
so how do we continue like this tradition of like printing out photos and um yeah, like I've started my photo wall like on our, walls at home, but like it stopped halfway because it's like, what photos do I print out? Like, I feel like now it's been very overwhelming of like, how
Hmm.
many photos do I print?
Hmm.
What photos are the most important? Like, I think
Hmm.
it kind of stops people. Like I said,
Yeah.
I have like thousands and thousands of photographs. It's
Yeah.
like, what's,
Overwhelm is definitely there.
yeah,
And then the storage of the ones, even if you change them out.
yeah.
It's funny when you were talking about your picture of your sister and yourself that your mom had kept. We did the same with the boys. Like I would do 5x7s for myself and five by
Mm-hmm.
sevens for my mother-in-law.
Mm-hmm.
And I have two boys that are now 23. He's going to be 24 soon, but I'll go with their current ages, 23 and 26. They're both on the edge of turning another year. And I have nephews that are 8 and 10 that are
Mm-hmm.
like the mini versions of the two of
Mm-hmm.
my boys. It's kind of funny personality wise too, but especially the two younger ones. Everyone calls Raleigh is my youngest nephew. Benjamin, who's my youngest,
Mm-hmm.
like everyone, my mother-in-law calls him Ben. She took care of, like, helped take care of the kids when I was working, like, had them for a few days when my kids were little. She has these guys. We're both live within minutes of their house, so they're both were there, but their necks were similar, their hair was similar. If you're behind them, their personalities were very similar. And so we've been telling Raleigh this as he figures out who he is. He's more of the introvert, and so was Ben when he was little, but he doesn't see Ben that way, right? So when
Mm-hmm.
we would talk about things that Ben used to be like, he was like, but now he's gotten more
Mm-hmm.
brave or more outgoing or found his things he liked. You could see the lights click. Well, we were going through the pictures and we keep them all in the same frame, but behind.
Yep, I do too.
So we pulled out all the years of the kids. And when we got to the one where Ben was the same age as Raleigh is now, his eyes were like, oh my God,
Yeah.
he does look like me. And he was like, I think I need to change my middle name to Benjamin.
That's so cute. I have the similar story. So when I showed the picture of my sister and I to my youngest Piper, she looked at it and was like, "Is that me and Sadie?" Which is her cousin. And they're 30 days apart in age. And so technically, as an identical twin, they're like my kids, technically, like half
Yeah.
half kids. So she looked at it, she goes, "Is that me and Sadie?" And I'm like, "No, that's me and Auntie." And she's like, "Oh, like that you can see even
Yeah.
like the slight differences." So I think it's really cool. And like
Yeah.
talking about like my girls, I don't I don't really remember like my mom telling us stories necessarily about what was going on, or maybe I just wasn't listening. Probably the latter. Um, but I always like around the girls' birthdays, I always talk about their birth story and how they came out and like what they look like and who held them, and I show them pictures of them, and like those are very sacred moments because I documented like my births with both girls, and like the first one was kind of traumatic, but like I still have those photos.
Mhm.
And to be honest, it took me a really long time to look back. And sometimes I even look back at those photos and it brings back like that deep, like either grief or regret or whatever.
Hmm.
Um, but that doesn't stop me from telling their stories and like,
Hmm.
I don't know, like, I don't know. I like making sure that they how much they were loved and
Hmm.
who was there and
Hmm.
like just pieces of like different stuff. I don't know. I was I was telling my husband about like the questions you were gonna ask. And it's just like I feel like it's so important about even the people that aren't in our lives anymore. Like my we had a really our neighbors next door growing up. So they we were like four when we moved into this new home where it was my hometown now, where I graduated in Waterville. And they had just retired. So it was like these retirees right here, and then a family of three young children. Hold on, group like came into this neighborhood, and so they're like, oh geez. But I have the best memories with these neighbors because they were kind of like our pseudo grandparents,
Hmm.
right? And we have photos with them and like whatnot. But like, I have one photo of him before he passed away with my daughter, and like I like that's the one image that I like don't want like to get rid of. I don't want anything to happen to it because like I'm gonna cry thinking about it. Sorry.
No,
I don't know.
that's
It's
it's
like
those important connections of humanity. So, not to put words onto that, but part of why I started doing this was to there's a quote and when I talked about this in my workshop, um, there's several versions of this in many different, not just the Orthodox religions, but that basically the idea that we live as long as we're remembered.
hmm hmm it's
Um,
like
and
that movie Coco.
mhm, which
So like
was about Dia de los Muertos, which is
yeah,
all about that for that. And that is fabulous. That's going to be a whole nother theme because
I
that's
like
coming up.
it.
But I did meet with a whole family. And I had been invited on another friend's podcast and into her Facebook group. And it turned out that all her friends and family are from Mexico. And when I started talking about my purpose, they're like, oh my gosh, we do it with objects and we do it with this, but now we could do the story behind with it. And wouldn't that be so amazing? So yeah, that is an amazing cultural, like everyone kind of feels that way. And
hmm
for me, not having all of that from my mom or dad, those treasures I have, I say this
hmm
all the time when I get to visit with people that knew my parents, because I lost both of my parents before I even met my husband. So I kind of felt like I always had these three segments of life. I had life with my parents when everything was really normal, like overly normal, crazy,
Yeah.
normal.
Yeah. hmm
And then we lost my mom and we had this little bit of time that was not pleasant, that was all of us grieving together. And then the time after was after we lost my dad too, which was only 4 years between.
hmm
But when I can find people, and especially now as an adult, when I can
hmm
talk to adults that can tell me the adult sides of my parents' stories too from
hmm
before, it helps me to know them in a different way I didn't know when I was younger. So that's again, we put these stories down. Maybe sometimes they're going to have to be saved till
Yeah.
they're old enough, because
Yeah.
we don't want to just share the stories that are appropriate for our young ones. We want them to evolve. So I do anyways. That's one of my purposes, is because I didn't know my parents as adults except for how I interacted with them as their
hmm
child. So feeling like I get to meet these adults that tell me little bits and pieces of them,
hmm
helps me know, first of all, they really did exist, because that's another weird part of timing. When you've lost someone, the hurt doesn't go away, the missing doesn't go away, but sometimes you start feeling like, were they physically even, like, how did
Yeah.
they fit in the world? Was it real? Was it just me? And where I don't even live where I grew up, I feel that way a lot. So yeah, not to go off, but like that picture with you and your neighbor, like,
Yeah.
shows it happen, brings back all the feelings, and it's a treasured, like,
Well, and
totem.
that moment in his life, I mean, like he was sick, he was going through probably dementia. He didn't know who he was. And so but that to me, that wasn't him. It
Mm-hmm.
just seeing the picture reminds me that they got to meet and that he was a big he it's the people in our lives that impact us the most that we want our family to remember. And
Yep.
it doesn't have to be like family members, it can be neighbors, it could be like, old high school friends, it could be
Yeah.
whatever it is. And
Yeah.
so I think it's so, yeah, it's especially when you lose someone. Exactly what you said. It's like you have before them and then you have after. And I think a lot of the times stories can get mushy, I
Hmm.
guess is the word I'll look for. I think that's the reason why when family gets together, they retell stories over and over
Hmm.
again because you don't want to forget them. And I mean, stories used to be told, like Homer and
Oral.
like
Yeah.
yeah, oral stories and stuff. So it's like, so you just tell them over and over again. And I think what needs to happen now is someone needs to write them down, or you hit record on a
Record or voice
yeah,
memo or something. We
yeah.
got so
I
many
think
easy ways.
exactly. Because like time time seems like it goes by really slowly, but like I just realized that like two of my cousins are going to be graduating from college and high school, and I'm like, weren't you just 2 years old like
Yeah.
last year? And like, yeah, my I have a fifth grader now. Like, I remember when she would like, it's my oldest like niece. She's 16, and I still remember her like eating
Being
her
born.
breakfast with a spoon,
Yeah. Yeah.
holding her 12 hours old, and
Yeah.
um, yeah. So it's just like I don't know. It's
Yeah.
yeah.
It's neat. But the
Hmm.
parallels definitely of the photography with the oral stories is just so
Hmm.
strong that I knew I wanted to have this talk with you. The vulnerabilities, again, is another similarity of being
Hmm.
vulnerable in our story, being vulnerable when we're in our pictures,
I think
and also recording other people, because I
yeah.
think you do both with your storytelling and your photography.
I
You,
think, yeah, I think
yeah.
the bravest thing you can do is to step in front of the camera, and I make sure to do it myself, either through self-portraits or having someone take photos of us. We
Mhm.
just actually had a photographer come to our house. She did a day in the life session.
Okay.
Um, yeah, so she was here with us for 6 hours, I think, and just stayed with us. And I think that's helpful in the sense that it's not a half-hour photo shoot, an hour photo shoot where you're like
Mhm.
standing and smiling. You're
Yeah.
like kids are crying and screaming, and you're making dinner, and like, so it's like she's just there to capture what's happening. And I think that's just so profound because I can look back and be like, oh, like I really did hug my kids. I wasn't yelling
Mhm.
at them 24/7. Or I think that's the biggest misconception I think people have when I want to document their family just as they are. They're like, our house is dirty. Like that has anything to do with photography. But like, what if I'm yelling? Kids cry, like they misbehave. I'm like, yes, they do. Like, but you also see like moments of love, connection,
Mhm.
like quiet moments. The quiet moments are so like you don't get a lot of that.
In
Um,
picture.
yeah, like
Yeah.
people think that you need to be smiling and happy, and you don't.
Hmm.
You don't even need
Yeah.
to be looking at the camera. Like, I
Yeah.
don't know. Yeah, it's just yeah.
And you
It
were
was
really good at helping. That was one thing before I go into the questions that we had talked about.
mhm,
But that was one of your gifts, I think, also was helping people feel comfortable within that.
mhm,
Because that was one of the things that helped me was we turned it from posing, right, to
mhm.
action and being.
Yeah.
And that the more authentic we were having fun sitting having coffee in a coffee shop or just
Mhm,
walking along, doing whatever we were doing outside, out and about, then the pictures that are my favorites really, came to, and it's motion and it's looking and it's doing. And
mhm,
yeah, I love that you were able to help me even to feel comfortable with what shows motion and not just
mhm.
the
Yeah.
usual
I
school
think
picture. Put your hands on your
um
lap, turn your
being someone who likes to observe people, I feel like if I wasn't a photographer, I'd probably be some type like in sociology, or like
mm-hmm,
I really like people.
mm-hmm.
Like being not being, I mean, being looking, I like being nosy. So people do things naturally and comfortably, and they everyone has their own like unique way of like looking or talking. And
Yeah,
like when you relax and you let your guard down, you do something that you would normally do, and that's what I'm trying to capture. And
yeah,
so I make people get out of their brains
yeah.
and into their bodies, and kind of just that's why I never stop talking. I make people move,
Mm-hmm.
like and like drinking coffee is something that you normally do.
Hmm. Hmm.
So I try to incorporate that in my sessions. Because when you start to think about what's happening, you get very self-conscious and you
Yeah.
stiffen up and
Yeah.
yeah. So
So funny. So I remember talking about like you doing things and expressions that people normally do. One of the things I remember you doing was you noticed the way I smiled and laughed with my sister, that I
mhm,
crinkled up my nose. And you were
mhm,
like, okay, we're going to do this again.
yeah.
And you did something. I really liked it. We're going to do that. I'm looking for this, but like let it happen naturally. Cause of course I
Yes.
wasn't going to go.
Yeah.
But I remember thinking, oh my gosh, I do that.
Yeah.
And
Well, those are the moments that I capture, like the little
yeah.
special moments. Like my youngest, she used to have like a pacifier. We called it a pat pat because of the company. But she used to put the pat pat in and then put a pat pat over it and do that. And I'm like, so I captured that. And my oldest, she curls her hair like me, like we do like a little stemming curling hair. And I captured that. That's what I want to remember. It's like, what
Hmm.
do you want to remember, like way off 12, 15, 20 years
Hmm.
from now? That's because like objects are thrown away
Yep.
usually. Like I might keep the pat pat, but like usually like stuffed animals will get thrown away, things will get
Yeah.
thrown away, but
Yeah.
you'll have a photo of that. So
Yeah. And it's the
yeah,
same with story, right? The like the little things that remind you of who that person was.
yeah,
Or if you're
like
writing about yourself, your things, your habits, or that
yeah.
person's habits, or no. I love
Like
it.
I fall into the trap of like my life is boring. I have nothing to say. And it's okay to take a break from that. But like realistically, that's what people want to know. Like that's
Hmm.
why social media is such a big thing. It's like you're connecting with other people and you're listening to their stories and you're feeling something
Hmm.
inside. And so like you have a moment. And so it's the same thing. Everyone, your life isn't boring.
Hmm.
Trust me. Um,
I have to get on more with the storytelling piece of it and be
yeah.
more not worried about it being an edited piece of my
Mhm.
words, you know.
Yeah.
No, I love that. Okay.
Yeah.
So we have been chatting for a little bit and I love it.
Yeah.
And I have two questions that are, they're not rapid fire because I always prepare people for these because I know
Yeah.
some of some podcasts, they surprise people with the questions. And
Mhm.
I literally was on a friend's podcast. I knew what the questions were and I still froze with all my answers.
Yeah.
But I have two. First of all, from me talking about my purpose being to, you know, when I didn't have some of my parents' stories that I wanted to make sure I did better for my boys. But I don't believe that's unique just because I was so young when
Mm.
my parents passed away. I believe we all have something that we wish we knew. And sometimes the person's there to tell it, but they won't, right? But is
Mhm.
there a story from your past that you don't know or don't have that you wish you knew?
It's funny. I was like racking my brain about this. Because it's like twofold. Because like I feel like I don't have a strong memory. So
Hmm.
photos and like things written, like because my mom has told us stories over and over again about like her family. It always seems to like slip away because I don't think that there's enough like photographic evidence of it. So
Hmm.
like I don't remember. Um, but going back to like maternity, I think stuff. Like, I think my mom has one photograph of her pregnant with us. Like, but I'm not entirely sure if I've seen it. Or if it was with my older sister. I don't remember. But I feel like that's something that could be really cool because I hear a lot of moms these days. And like, there's no shame if you don't want your photo taken. Like, it's not a, like, you should do this because your children will want
Yeah.
it. Um, I think it's such a cute and special moment to
Hmm.
be like, your mom is so young when she has kids.
Yeah, that
And like
too.
they're so cute and like even though they probably don't like I felt like a fat cow. Like but
Yeah.
like I don't know, it's just something special knowing that you're like in your mom. I
Yeah.
don't know.
That's
Like
a connection time. Yeah. It shows
yeah,
you and her and in a very obviously awe-inspiring time.
yeah. And knowing that we were twins, like my mom didn't know she was having twins until like 14 days before we were born.
Oh, wow.
So yeah. So like looking back, I'd be like, did you know?
Yeah.
But like she was young when her mom died too. So like having more stories about her and like like her grandmother and like their dynamic. Like I come from an Italian family. Like they used to have Sunday dinners, and I'm like, do you have pictures of Sunday dinner? Like I think back then they just did portraits of like Easter portraits and like,
Hmm.
Christmas
Hmm.
portraits. And so like just more candid photos of the family around the table
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
whatnot. So
Yeah.
I think
I love
one of
that.
those. Yeah.
And is there a story from your life or something that was past, a story of someone in your life or from your past, that
Mhm.
you definitely want to document and pass along to the future, to your girls and to the future? Because I know that some people, it's could be aunties or uncles, and some people are doing it for not just their children, but for just the whole
Mhm.
sake of preserving.
I think I'm trying to do a better job of documenting my kids with their grandparents because I don't have a lot of pictures of my grandparents.
Ah, yeah.
Yeah. So like I mean, what is it? I didn't get to meet my mom's mom. I met my mom's dad, but he died when we were young. My dad's mom died when we were really young. We have pictures of with them, but like, and then my grandfather, my dad's dad, he died when we were in college or after college, and so like we got to really know him. But
Hmm.
like, you only hear like certain snippets of stories at
Hmm.
Thanksgiving and Christmas, so it's like you want to know more,
Hmm.
and you only know them as older people.
Yeah. And
You
in
don't
that
know them
role, yeah.
Yeah. You don't know them as like, dad. You don't know them as like, younger people. So, yeah. I think
Yeah.
passing, like making sure that my kids know who their grandparents are, knowing that the inevitable is going to happen someday, hopefully
Yeah.
further
Yeah.
in the distance, but
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
just like when they were little, having stories to tell them and like, yeah. So, because
Excellent.
I know that my husband has really good memories of his grandparents or his grandmother and like grandfather. And so like I think having those stories like continuing on so no one forgets about them because if you don't tell the stories of people in your past, then just
Yeah. Then
everything's going to
they're
be forgotten.
passing. Yeah. That's
Yeah.
exactly
I heard
beautiful.
a I heard a story the other day about like what do you do with photographs that you don't know the people in? Like how when you're
Ooh,
like
that's a great one. Yes.
yeah, so like someone was like, what do you do with those? So it's like if nothing's written on the photograph and you don't know who the people are, I mean, obviously it's okay to throw it away, but like that's somebody's story,
Mm-hmm.
especially if you're like cleaning out attics and
Mm-hmm.
whatnot. Of like, so
Mm-hmm.
it's like like pulling out the albums. Like, my mother-in-law used to tell us stories about how her mother-in-law used to pull out the album like before they were about to leave. Be
Oh
like, no,
yeah.
no, let's
Oh
look through
wait,
the
we gotta look at
photos.
these again.
Yeah, so like I want that to continue to happen. I want her to do that more and more. So
Yeah.
yeah,
That's
yeah,
beautiful. I love that.
yeah.
Well,
Mhm.
thank you again so much for taking this time.
You're
Can you
welcome.
share with everyone, because I know that you have some space that you are doing, and I know you love doing this and helping people with the pictures
Mhm.
in smaller projects and larger projects. And I know you love the family piece of it or the marketing part for anyone who needs headshots and things like that. But I know you had some
Mhm.
exciting like transitions of even your own space.
Mhm.
So if you could share how people could find you,
Mhm.
and even on Instagram, which I know it's more Instagram that you're doing. Is it showing up in Facebook and Instagram when you're doing a lot of your
Yeah,
stuff? Yeah.
I have a Facebook business page, but I
Hmm.
haven't really posted a lot to
Yeah.
it. But
No, the
I'm
more
most
the
active on
conversations.
Instagram. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So my website is laurenbodwellphotography.com, and I actually just got it redesigned, which is really fun. It only took like 10 years. Um, and then I'm most active on Instagram, and it's my name at Lauren Bodwell. And I'm on stories and like kind of document through my day. And jam time will start December
Yep.
1st.
Yeah.
The advent calendar is actually already in my closet. I'm like pretending it's not there, so don't open it up. Um, but yeah, so I'm hoping to start like an email list and
Hmm.
like you've inspired me to like start telling stories again.
Hmm.
But like you said, I do have this new space, so I am working with somebody else in a space, and so I have a studio space with like backdrops and very simple. And so I'm helping, headshots, portraits, like making content for other people. That's a big bulk of what I do now because like with branding and whatnot, I like to help people, tell their stories by incorporating small pieces of content. But I also
Beautiful.
like the simple portraits now. And so that's a nice space to do that
Yeah.
with like mom and dad and little family portraits and
Hmm. I
whatnot.
love it.
So yeah,
Thank you. This was
you're welcome.
wonderful. And thank you, everyone who joined us today. You'll be able to find this on YouTube, on my YouTube channel. And also, it will be on our usual podcast. So thank you again, Lauren, for
You're
joining us
welcome.
today.
I love that you're doing this. I love that you're trying to preserve stories for the future.
Thank you so much. And we're
Yeah.
kind of in it together,
Yes.
similar paths. Thanks again.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Wasn't that a fun episode? I enjoyed our conversation so much. And if you would like to continue our conversation, be sure to follow this podcast and share with friends. This helps share the mission of preserving the past with stories. Want more tips, tools, and inspiration? Head over to melissaannkitchen.com. And as always, let's get writing your powerful personal stories.